Greetings. This is Coach Veronica Marie with part two of encouragement during diagnosis. One of the most beneficial things, although it was a challenge oftentimes, was the power of presence. A lot of times when you receive a diagnosis and you don't really know what's going on in your body, there's this waiting period between point A and point B, fear, anxiety, depression, worry, heaviness can just set in like a ton of bricks. And when I was experiencing that, I really wanted deeply for someone to understand where I was. I longed for someone to touch that deep part of me and help lighten the load somehow. And I didn't even really know how because it was the first time in my life that I really had to say, "Hey, I need help," emotionally. I was very used to taking care of myself and very effective at that emotionally, but I began to have situational needs. Oh, I began to need and want people to hear me deeply. It seemed to lighten the load when it happened or when it could happen because it didn't happen a lot. And as a result, I had to find out what I could do within myself because when you're going through something serious like that, I could see how some people drown. They drown in the weight of it, and they sometimes they don't know how to ask for support. Sometimes they never had support, and sometimes they need it, but the people around cannot offer it. It's so much that goes on, and I can see how some people drown. I just didn't want to drown. I didn't want to drown because I have children, and I feel I'm an asset to their life. I feel like an asset to their life, and I know that I am an asset. So I wouldn't drown. The power of presence would bring me comfort momentarily. Sometimes the wonder is this spreading? Then I would have to say, right now, I'm healthy. I would wonder, am I going to be sick from medication? Is there going to be a medication for me? And I would have to say, but right now I'm healthy. What if I die from this? I would have to say, today is not the day. I often had to remind myself that I deserve to feel good and that feeling bad would not stop what was going on. And so many times I didn't see the usefulness in stewing in depression and heaviness. I figured if I was going to be going through it, then I would enjoy the life that I have or had and continue to have. And so I refused to go long periods of time in sadness. I did experience it. I do still experience it. Some nights I sob. And I recognize that the sobbing is from fear, right? Also, the sobbing is disappointment because you nobody tells you that one day you could end up with this diagnosis. You're not prepared well, especially in the West. We're not prepared for death in no kind of way. So it remains a constant fear to face. Part of it is the ego doesn't really know what exists beyond this reality because it doesn't understand spiritual things, you know? The ego associated with your brain is very well versed to this time space reality. And so it lives within you as part of you, like this is the only reality there is, and this is the only reality that matters. It is the only reality that matters to the ego because the body functions with the brain and the brain processes this reality. But just because this is the reality that is most important to the ego doesn't mean it's most important. This life we live as a human is part of a continuum of infinity. And so when we transition from a human form into another form, it's the same life different quality of energy and consciousness. And I have to double down on that every day to remember, because if I'm not careful, my ego will fear death as if it is something to fear. We also, within the ego, have this really inflated sense of importance, like we're the center of the world. That's the perspective of the ego. And everything revolves around our perspective because, that's how we're designed. However, we have to take on many different perspectives. And feeling important to the people around us is beautiful, and being influential is beautiful. But when we fall prey to the illusion that we we are indispensable to this journey here on earth, then we create suffering. We start saying things like, I don't deserve this. Or we start looking back like, I would have never expected my life to end up like this. Or the disappointment of, I have stuff to do, I'm not finished. Those thoughts are of the ego. And they're not good, bad, wrong, or right. They are what they are, but dwelling on them will produce a great deal of suffering. So I've found that looking into the idea of what lies beyond this human existence in a deeper way has helped me. Coming away from seeing myself as the most important being in my children's life. I am an important being. And when I transition, whether that's 50 years from now or 5 years, they will have with them everything that they need. So I don't have to carry this worry about them. So that's been a work over the last year and a half. All of this, it didn't come overnight. And it's continuing to be a work. I understand that we didn't come here to stay. I can remember the scripture my dad telling me when I was young that it's appointed one time for every man to be born and one time for every man to die. And so it is cycles of death and rebirth. And I've been looking at that in a deep way. I am part of that. And I can surrender to that idea that I came here to evolve and transition. I didn't come here to stay. We didn't come here to stay. However, while I'm here, I will do the most to create situations that satisfy me, and that involves satisfying my children. These are some of my reflections as I've been processing through that initial diagnosis, which happened early last year. And as I continue to encourage myself, I encourage you to discover thoughts that uplift you, that are true, that really speak to the depth of you, not just positive thinking. I encourage you to have beautiful conversations with people who have depth. I encourage you to understand yourself and enjoy when you are understood deeply. I encourage you to stay present. A lot of things could happen in every moment, but only one thing is happening in every moment, and that is the thing that should happen in that moment. This is a universal truth I've been studying for years, and so it is. Ashe. If you need any coaching or you find yourself in this type of situation and would like to set up a session to be heard, then you can sign up on my website at veronicamarie.com. I also have digital products available, and coming soon, I'll be writing a book of encouragement for people going through diagnosis like this. Until then, have your beautiful creation.